Walter Lloyd, in his sequel to A Night to Remember, summed up in his new title the enduring interest in one of the greatest maritime disasters in history. He titled it The Night Lives On. And it is, as he said, the unsinkable subject. Just 20 minutes short of midnight, April 14th, 1912, this beautiful and great White Star liner, making her maiden voyage from Southampton to New York, had a rendezvous with ice in the calm, dark waters of the North Atlantic. She brushed the berg so gently that many on board didn't notice it, but so lethally that she was instantly doomed. By midnight, Captain Edward J. Smith knew the worst and ordered the lifeboats filled and lowered. At 12:15 a.m., the Titanic sent her first distress call. At 12:45, she began firing rockets, for there was a light on the horizon, tantalizingly near. The light remained motionless. On the Titanic, the ship's bellboys, lads of 14 or 15, brought up loaves of bread for the lifeboats now dropping, one after another, into the sea. Far below, the engineers kept the lights burning, topside. The band played cheerful music on the deck. Ragtime, some say. At 1:10, as the boat number 1 pulled away, the water lapped the portholes just under the ship's name. 30 minutes later, as Collapsible C rode off, the name had vanished into the sea. And the forward well deck was awash. The light still burned and the band still played. By 2:05 in the early morning hours of Monday, April 15th, the last boat had been launched, leaving nearly 1,600 men, women, and children stranded on the sloping decks. The light still burned with a reddish glow, and the band probably played on, but no one is quite sure. At 2:17 in the morning, the Titanic slowly, almost majestically, stood on end. The lights blinked once and went out forever. And then came a thundering roar as everything movable within the ship broke loose and plunged forward. The great hull itself sagged as though finally defeated. And wrote Mr. Lord, at 2:20 in the morning, only 2 hours and 40 minutes after she struck the berg, she settled back slightly and slipped beneath the sea. Mr. Lord wrote of the nearly 1,600 people who went down to the Titanic, only 13 were picked up by the boats that hovered nearby. Why does that terrible night still live on? And what is the hold of this long-lost liner? Why are people still so fascinated by her, belonging to Titanic organizations all over the world? Even now as we speak, many hundreds of people are preparing to come to Philadelphia this weekend to form a new organization, Titanic International, making its debut this coming Saturday, April 15th, at the Philadelphia Maritime Museum, 77th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic. I'll return in a moment with my guests, Jack Eaton, Michael Ralph, and Ed Thorne. We'll begin to take calls in about 20 minutes. Our contact number, 365-4100. Remember when you were little and Dad said, "Come on, we're going to be going out to eat," and then you knew that you were going to that favorite family spot? Well, there is that favorite family restaurant right in Northeast Philly. Chevaliero's restaurant is located off Frankfort Avenue on Sheffield Avenue, about 3 blocks down. And it's perfect for a family night out. Chevaliero's features South Philly cuisine with a new menu that includes veal chevaliero, chicken scampi over ravioli, and their chicken Nicola with shrimp is out of this world. And Chevaliero's allows you and your family to enjoy a relaxing night out, eating your favorite food without spending a lot of money. Chevaliero's is now open Tuesday to Saturday from noon to 10 p.m. and Sunday from 4 to 9. They're closed on Mondays. Call 332-8880 and ask about their daily specials for WWDB listeners. Chevaliero's located at 4503 Sheffield Avenue, 3 blocks off of Frankfort Avenue. Call them tonight. Open tonight. Call them at 332-8880. Open until 10 o'clock tonight. Chevaliero's, 4503 Sheffield Avenue.
You're live on 96.5.
Hi there. You know, I like to keep things simple, so there are a few things I keep in mind, such as buy only the best, like America's bestseller, Kenmore, only at Sears. Right now, you can get a Kenmore washer for just $258, dryer just $218 through Saturday. So there's no better time to buy them. Both are large capacity, both are heavy duty, so let them do the work. I mean, life's too short.
Your money's worth and a whole lot more.
96.5.
And for a few weeks now, you've heard me talking about a fantastic service called Growing Younger. It's run by a wonderful lady named Carol Morgan and designed to help people over 40 discover or rediscover romance. And Carol began the service years ago when her own father became a widower. And I'm happy to say that many of our WWDB listeners have contacted Carol, and they're on their way to developing new, exciting relationships. You see, Carol carefully screens and interviews all of her clients to keep the caliber high. Her clients are men and women who have no trouble meeting people, just the right people. And Carol Morgan knows how to match people, how to bring them together. And I'm confident that she can find the right person for you, as she has for so many. So if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s and financially secure, call Carol Morgan during business hours for more details. The number is 215-664-6224, and you can start growing younger too. 664-6224. 77 years ago tonight, the Titanic was well into the second day of her maiden voyage to New York. Its passengers blissfully unaware of the icebergs in the North Atlantic and the tragedy that awaited her. With me tonight, Jack Eaton, Titanic historian and co-author with Charles Haas of Titanic, Triumph and Tragedy, a chronicle in words and pictures. Michael Ralph, historian, writer, and marine artist with a special interest in the Titanic. And Ed Thorne, who knows as much about the Titanic as most people around today. Certainly more than I do. But, gentlemen, I want to welcome you all. And Jack and Michael, welcome back.
Thank you.
2 years. Would you come in a little bit closer, about 3 inches away? Okay. What made the ship so special? Who wants to tackle that, Jack?
Well, I've always thought that it was the people that were...
More than the ship itself.
More than the ship itself.
Even though it was new and it was innovative and it was big, the biggest ever up till that time.
There were other ships that were, her sister Olympic was within reasonable limits of being the same size. Mm-hmm. There was a ship building that was going to be larger. There were the Aquitania. There were a couple of German ships that were building that were larger.
Mm-hmm. How about the interiors?
The interiors probably were high Edwardian. They were glamorous in their own right, but then also the opposing line, the rival line, the Cunard company, had two liners afloat whose interiors were
pretty fancy too.
Pretty fancy as well, the Lusitania and the Mauretania. Mm-hmm. And they were faster ships, of course. The Titanic and the Olympic were planned for comfort rather than for speed. Mm-hmm. So the ship itself, the Titanic, certainly was no fly-by-night affair. It was very well furnished. The accommodation for the third-class passengers exceeded the first-class accommodations of ships probably not more than 25 or 30 years earlier. And it was a glamorous ship, and it was filled with glamorous people.
Yeah.
And it's the variety of the people, the first, second, and third class passengers, as well as the crew members that make this story so vital to me.
Okay. Let me talk to Michael for a minute. Michael, and we'll get back to the passengers. What were some of the things on that ship that made it so special in terms of hardware?
It was huge. It was the biggest ship in the world at that time. It was about 1,000 tons larger than her sister ship Olympic, namely due to some last-minute innovations. They decided that the first-class accommodations on board were just not quite adequate for the time. They made them even bigger and better. Mr. Ismay, who was the managing director of the line, decided after doing the maiden voyage of the Olympic in 1911 that he could do better with the new ship. And he took a whole promenade deck, Deck B, and said, we don't need two promenade decks here. Let's close this in and make large cabins with private verandas.
Now, promenade deck is what, exactly?
Promenade deck is a covered deck where you can look out over the sea, and not to get rained on and keep the sun off of you. The Edwardian women.
But you're still sitting outdoors, right?
You're outdoors with a breeze, but the Edwardian women wanted to keep the sun off of them. It was very unfashionable to have a suntan back then.
That's right, yeah.
We've gone full circle.
Haven't we? Yeah.
But he decided, Mr. Ismay decided to take the B deck and make it really opulent and make these accommodations the very best thing available on the Atlantic.
Did I notice that they had something that it looked like a swimming pool or pools?
It was what they called, it was not called a swimming pool, it was called a plunge bath.
A plunge bath.
Yeah, and it was a large affair, an aluminum tank, not aluminum, steel, stainless steel tank that it was not very opulent at all. It wooden deck around it, metal railings and round portholes, but it was a precursor of a lot of the grand swimming pools that came later on such ships as the Queen Mary, the Aquitania, and on the Normandy.
Yeah. How many dining rooms did they have?
On Titanic, she had one for each class. She had one a la carte restaurant called the Ritz, which was up the Cafe Parisien, which was up on the B deck.
And was what the name implied, I would assume.
That was an extra tariff restaurant. The first class decided that some of them were being a bit of a snob, decided the first-class dining salon was not grand enough for them. They wanted to have their private little dinner parties, and the extra tariff they didn't mind. So they instituted this extra tariff restaurant. Now become very popular again.
Jack?
You got a 15-pound rebate if you said to the company at the time you bought your ticket that you were going to take all your meals in the Ritz restaurant.
What did 15 pounds mean to those people anyway? What was the pound then? About $4.75? $5
then.
Yeah.
So it was $75, but that's when you could buy a fairly nice automobile for $150 or $200. You could buy a house for $2,300. You could buy a suit of clothes for $12.
And the two wireless guys, McBride and Phillips, made $20 a month.
Yes.
And according to Walter Lord, they'd have to make enough. It would be 18 trips crossing the ocean before they had enough money to be able to afford passage
I think
themselves.
it was working 18 years.
Was it 18 years?
18 years.
Yeah. All right.
Before
So
they
that
could go
gives you an
first
idea.
class.
So you had your haves and your have-nots. What do those first-class cabins cost? I mean, what did it cost?
They ranged in price from $4,300 U.S. dollars to about, I think the least expensive one in high season was $125. And for that money, you got fairly good-sized space. That is, even for the cheaper cabins, you got a nice-sized room. You got very comfortable bed. The furnishings were comfortable. Of course, the more you paid, the more space you got, and the more furniture you got. The $4,300 cabins were a sitting room, 2 bedrooms, a wardrobe room, and a separate room across the corridor for your servants. And some of the people did carry 2 servants, in addition to the ship's staff that was waiting on them, the stewards and so on.
And some were picking up servants, I understand, in Queenstown to bring the... No?
No. There were some girls that were coming across the Atlantic to work in New York as servants, but they were not specifically being picked up by...
They weren't attached to any of those people there. But they'd already been hired in advance to be servants when they came to New York.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
They also, in the first class, some of the cabins contained a novelty then, which was private bathrooms with full tubs. A lot of your cabins, you had to trek down the hall and have your steward prepare your bath. In the morning, you set up an appointment with him, and all this was done by your steward. He would handle this, and these bathrooms, it was quite a luxury back then just to have your own private bathroom.
You'd leave your shoes outside the door, and they'd be polished when you got there in the morning?
Today, they'd be stolen.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Were the towels warmed up? Like once when I stayed a while in Paris at an old hotel called the Grand Hotel near the Grand Opera House. I was shocked to find that his huge towel over pipes, they were heated towels. I said, "Boy, this is the way to go, right?"
I don't know. Did they have towel warmers?
They didn't.
I don't think they went that far.
Yeah, but it was pretty opulent. Well, tell me about what the kind of menu they have. What do they have for dinner in the first class? You had a choice. I know that you...
Some of these things. I've looked at some of the menus of Titanic. they offered, and some of the things I can't translate them. They had very strange names like kakiliki, which was a soup.
Let me give you an idea here, Bernie, what they had. Now, I have to confess to the listeners that I don't carry these in my head. I'm reading this from a list.
That's fine. That's acceptable.
And it's Titanic's shopping list, and it's from the second book that Charlie Haas and I wrote, and it's called Titanic Destination Disaster. And the shopping list, I can give you a few of the items. They carried 75,000 pounds of fresh meat, and they carried 25,000 pounds of poultry and game, 40,000 fresh eggs, 6,000 pounds of fresh butter, 1,200 quarts of fresh cream, hothouse grapes, half a ton, 10,000 pounds, that's 5 tons of rice and dried beans, ice cream, 1,750 quarts. You can put together a pretty terrific menu.
Yes, you
with
can.
those things. That's just a partial list.
Yeah.
And they also had, of course, plenty to stock the bars.
And you had some real gourmands back in those days. You
But
had
everything on board that ship, too, you've got to understand, was fresh, unsoiled, unpolluted. It was all fresh foods. We don't have too many of those today.
Right, yeah.
Without the preservatives.
You had to worry about pesticides and
No.
Yeah.
There was quite a large storage area for all of these refrigerated items, and it was down in the lower decks and down on F deck. They had separate rooms for westbound beef and another refrigerator for eastbound beef. And if you were sailing to New York, you got it out of the westbound refrigerator and coming back across the Atlantic.
Was there a reason for that?
Probably to keep the meat at a lower temperature on the eastbound side and not to broach the door.
Yeah, so it wouldn't thaw out as fast.
Some of the chefs, too, would pick the best pork to get the best bargains and do their shopping accordingly.
Yeah, all right. With us tonight, we're talking about the Titanic, and we're on to the 77th anniversary of the sinking of that great ship. Jack Eaton, Michael Ralph, and Ed Thorne with us. And this is Bernie Herman on WWDB, the talk station. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to a brand new sponsor of our program, Todd's Chem Dry Carpet Cleaning Service. And if you're asking what is Chem Dry, well, Chem Dry is a totally new state-of-the-art carpet cleaning method that uses CO2 to rid you totally of all dirt, grease, and pet stains. Other cleaning methods can actually hurt your carpets. Sticky residues from shampoo never really dry, and steam cleaning can cause carpets to rot on mildew. Now, Todd's Chem Dry is completely safe and totally effective, and carpets cleaned the Chem Dry way dry in less than 1 hour. Laboratory tests show that carpets treated by Chem Dry stay clean longer than factory-fresh carpets. Todd even gave me a demonstration last week, and I'll tell you, the Chem Dry method really works. Todd's Chem Dry will also do on-site upholstery and drapery cleaning, and for more information, call Todd's Chem Dry at 609-795-4442. That's 609-795-4442. In Philadelphia, dial 743-4442.
WWDB.
A message from Ken McFeely, a police officer in New York City for 19 years. He was so respected, he was elected president of the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association.
My name is Ken McFeely. Right now, I'm living under a death sentence. The doctors tell me that I have maybe 5 or 6 weeks to go because I have lung cancer caused by smoking. The danger that threatened my life as a policeman was sitting in that radio car and lighting up that cigarette. I'm 47 years old, and I'll never see 48. You face more danger with the 20 cigarettes that are in your pocket than any 6 bullets in somebody's gun. Cigarettes are a time bomb that you plant in your own life that explodes 20 or 30 years later. And you know something? You can stop it if you stop smoking now.
Ken recorded this message for other smokers to hear before he died in October 1986. Brought to you by the American Heart Association and paid for by the Martin Himmel Health Foundation.
96.5.
The Secretary's Week begins April 24th, and this year, remember your secretaries with a gift they'll remember, an authentic replica of the original Reisman pretzel tin. Now, each tin stands 1 foot high, and it's filled with a big 3-pound assortment of crisp, freshly baked Reisman pretzels. Individual packages of chocolate-covered pretzel rods, cheese pips, pretzel sticks, mini pretzels, and more are a delicious surprise for everyone. And when the pretzels are gone, the tin remains as a beautiful reminder of your thoughtfulness. Your secretary will love it. And why not order a tin for yourself, too? Reisman can ship your tins anywhere coast to coast. They'll even include a gift card expressing your good wishes. To place your order or for more information, call this toll-free number during business hours, 1-800-232-TINS. That's 1-800-232-TINS. Order now for guaranteed delivery during Secretary's Week. 1-800-232-TINS. I was watching a video last night when I came home. It was called Titanic, A Question of Murder. That was produced, I guess, by BBC, and then and Ed picked it up off PBS for me. And early on, there was some footage from one of the reunions here, and I think there was one in 1982.
Right.
Edwina McKenzie was here, along with Eva Hart. We'll talk about them later. And there were a lot of people who attended who are just buffs, like we, most of us are. And a buff doesn't necessarily mean expert. So I don't consider myself an expert. I consider you men experts. I'm a buff.
But we're buffs.
All right. But one of the many young adults, that was always surprised me how many young people, young adults, are fascinated about something that happened over 75 years ago. And he was asked why his obsession. And he said he thought it might be because of the glamour and the riches, but also, listen to this, that he secretly wished he'd been a passenger on that fateful voyage, that he wished he'd been there to share the experience. And at first I thought, that's kind of strange, and then I thought about it again, and I thought, there have been times in the past when I'd wished I'd been on the Titanic. Not to go down with the ship. I don't have a death wish, gentlemen. But what is that? What is there about that? Is it a desire to be a part of history? What is that? Have any of you experienced the same thing?
Oh, I think that's a rather common phenomenon.
It is common.
Oh, yeah. There are people who go out on weekends and reenact the battles of the Civil War. There is a group in New England that does the Revolutionary War battles. I'm sure, although I'm not certain, but there must be somebody that does the Battle of Waterloo. It's a desire to project yourself into the historic background, and I think the Titanic offers a superb opportunity for anyone to do that because so much is known of her. Her sister Olympic's maiden voyage had a lot more publicity, but the Titanic, for her very, very short life, was a remarkably well-documented ship. We have builders' details. We have accounts in the local newspapers in Belfast, Ireland, where she was constructed. Her construction is covered in not intimate detail, but in more detail than was the construction of her sister Olympic.
Is there a reason for that?
Probably because of the interest generated by the Olympic. And then the builder said, well, we're putting even more marble and more paneling and more thick carpets into the sister ship, and everybody's curiosity was piqued, and they wanted to see what this marvelous new ship was going to develop into. So I think that the Titanic offers a wonderful stage on which the drama of the disaster is constantly being reenacted, either in people's minds or in the many books and motion pictures and television programs that have been produced about it.
Can I tell you something? I really had mixed feelings about the Ballard expedition. And I wanted to see what the ship looked like. I didn't want to see it. In my mind, I knew it would not be in pristine condition, but I also didn't anticipate that it ended up the way it did. And here's a caller to ask about the condition of the ship. Hello, Jack. You're on the air.
Yes. Good evening, Bernie. Been an old merchant marine officer. I was a little puzzled when they showed the underwater pictures of the Titanic, especially in the back and the stern part of the ship. And I was very puzzled by those pictures. I didn't see all the films, but I did see just a little bit by the stern. It looked to me like it was a little too good condition. I've been very, very puzzled by all these films so far.
Okay, we have the pictures here, and anyway, gentlemen, address the question.
The stern was really mangled.
The stern is really messed up.
It was the ship. From what we can gather now, the ship broke in two very near the surface, if not practically on the surface when it went down.
This is the stern here, isn't it?
Right.
And that's really mangled. I mean, it's
when the stern was full of air, and what we can gather, she went down, and the force of the water roaring into all these compartments crushed her. And it peeled back decks like a can of sardines.
But doesn't it show the stern sitting straight up?
That's the bow.
That's the bow, Jack. That's the bow.
No, I thought it was the stern that I saw. Maybe it was the bow. Yeah, all right.
Those sections are sitting straight up.
Right, okay, it was the bow that I saw, and I think you could see the name Titanic, but I wasn't sure.
No, you can't.
No.
No. Anyway, the bow looked to me like it was sitting straight up, and it kind of puzzled me that after falling down all those hundreds of feet, that'd be falling upright in such a perfect condition.
Well,
I mean, a perfect position is what I meant.
Let Jack Eaton respond.
I think that this is one of the most wonderful recommendations for a shipbuilder in history. Harland and Wolff put not only a great deal of love and attention into building this ship, but they put some of the best steel that the British Empire could produce. And we're seeing the results of that 75 years later, or 77 years later, in the preservation, even after not only sinking all that distance, but plowing into the bottom of the Atlantic. There she sits, a tribute to the workmanship.
Okay, now when they showed movies, though, of the Titanic sinking, it seemed like she was going almost straight down by the bow. You know, where you saw the stern up in the air, and it kind of puzzled me that it could get to the bottom and be absolutely horizontal with the surface on the bottom.
Well,
she's aerodynamically designed to go through the water. She's going to find the least resistance as she's going through the water too. When she went down, she planed. She sort of glided like a leaf back and forth.
Why don't you
slowly.
describe the sketch of the Titanic breaking up near the surface? And I can give you this one right here if you don't have it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's on the left-hand side.
I got it.
Okay.
Okay. When she went down, the ship filled from the front, from the bow. The weight of her dropped her down further and further and further. Finally, the foredeck washed under. Her forward bridge area went under. She started to tilt faster. The momentum started to pivot, where the stern would rise up out of the water very fast. Now you're dealing with 200 to 250 foot of steel, and it had to give. There was an expansion joint built into the ship just to. So she would work on the ocean when she was sailing. This gave out. This broke. This snapped in half.
Fairly just under the surface, though.
Right. But now, the front end, while this was going on, her bow started to break away. The boilers and everything tumbled forward. Her engines tore loose from the beds. The reciprocating turbines, which were monster things, 4 stories high, they took off. They fell forward.
And they fell out of the ship, didn't they?
Yes, and that weakened the hull even more. So she was in a very weakened condition, and she just split in half, and the bow took off separately on its way to the bottom. The stern was still on the surface at this time. It settled back a little bit, and pivoted, it rotated, and some of the passengers who were jumping off of the ship at the time knew that it was breaking apart underneath them. Mr. Thayer, who was from Philadelphia at the time, was the only person who really recounted that he saw the ship breaking in half under him as he jumped in.
Well, Jack Thayer and Dick Williams, who jumped off at the same time. Dick was about 21 years old, and
Jack
everybody
was 19.
discounted what they had said.
Right, they're just children. They didn't know what they were talking about.
Let me ask you this question. On the bottom of the ocean now, you're saying there's 2 separate parts of the Titanic.
Right.
I see. Well, I didn't know that because I only saw just a...
Not only that, but how far apart are they,
They're
approximately?
about 2,500 feet. The bow is pointing north, and the stern is pointing south.
Oh.
Total opposite
So they're
direction.
about a half a mile apart, aren't they?
Right, and in between them is a huge debris field where there's just about everything imaginable scattered about.
The stern is, as we mentioned earlier, in absolutely deplorable condition, probably because of the not only the force with which it hit, and you have to remember that the stern was less aerodynamically controlled. Her descent was more of a direct descent, and when she hit flat, whereas the bow planed in. And I remember when the wreck was first discovered, Mr. Haas and I were asked to identify some of the very first photographs that were taken of the wreck. And I can use an arbitrary figure here. They're out of 500 photographs, 450 of them were of the bow section, and we could identify elements of more than 2/3 of those. The other 50 or so were of the stern, and I don't think we got more than 10 things that we could positively identify.
Well, let me ask you this very important question, and it's puzzled me ever since they took pictures of the wreck underwater. Is there anything at all they have with the word Titanic on it?
No.
Nothing at all?
Nothing.
Wait now. Recently, the French went back out again, and with a whisk broom detached some little bit of an article. They went along the bow area and brushed off an area where the name...
Can you remember?
That was 20th Century Fox.
And
It was a
remember
Zanuck.
the producer, was it Billy Wilder?
It was Wilder.
Uh-huh.
Gene Negulesco was the director.
Right, he directed.
Yeah.
And I've always regarded that as the best of the Hollywood pictures. Now, of course, A Night to Remember was based on
That was
Walter's-
English also.
Walter's marvelous book, and Carol Reed directed it. Bill McQuitty
And beautifully done.
produced it, and just a superb.
But about this baker, what did he do now?
He got drunk.
On what? Does anyone know the
He
brand?
drank
Vanilla extract, wasn't it?
yes.
Oh.
He
It was extract?
He took the extract down to his cabin.
The
He
movie-
knew the ship was in trouble.
The movie shows him drinking scotch.
Scotch, yeah.
And a certain brand of scotch, as a matter of fact.
Yeah,
but in reality, it was vanilla extract with a high alcoholic content from the bakery.
And he knew the ship was in deep trouble. He went down to his cabin near the end, and he couldn't get to it. It was underwater. By that time, he was sufficiently pickled, whereas he went up and started tossing deck chairs over the side and to help out best he could, and wandered aimlessly to the back end of the ship and held on and rode it up and figured that was a good time to step off, went over the railing and right into the water.
Now,
Never
how
even
far
got
did he
his
have
head
to?
wet.
How far did he have to step down? When
12 feet, I
12 feet altogether.
approximately.
That was it.
Yeah,
Never
no-
got his head wet.
Now, before the ship began to really start to sink, as the boats were beginning to go, lifeboats beginning to go down, there were people that said that they, and I think it might have been Eva Hart or Edwina McKenzie who said we couldn't even see the water from up there. It was about 70
Edwina, they were 70 feet. When she got into the boat, they were 70 feet above the sea.
Yeah.
Right. That was near the back end of the ship, though. That was boat. Edwina was, 13?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me a building downtown that's 70 feet at the top. Anything.
Wanamaker's.
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 That's a pretty big distance.
That's a good drop.
That was the.
Was it dark? Was it dark? Because in one episode,
Pitch black.
You see, I read there were a lot. It was star bright, and the other was very dark.
It was pitch. If you've ever taken a cruise, I just got off a cruise, and every time I go out on deck at night, I envision Titanic and the stars. And when there is no moon, and you're out on the front end of a ship, and you look up and you see the stars lit up, after a while, your eyes become accustomed, and you see quite a bit.
You do.
But it is still awful dark. Awful dark and cold.
But not in the Caribbean, it's not.
No.
Those are the
But in
cruises I've taken.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go to the phones out to Newtown and talk to Dan. Hello, Dan. You're on the air.
Good evening, gentlemen. Just wanted to ask a question. I recently read the book, The Only Way to Cross, and towards the later chapters they mentioned the United States. And as of the publication of the book, it was still in existence, tied up in Norfolk or something. And this was, I imagine, the last publication was 5 or 6 years ago. Just wondering if the ship is still in existence.
Yes, indeed.
Huh.
Yes, indeed. She's in Norfolk. Went down there a few weeks ago. They moved her from her layup position at the government pier, and they moved her back over to her birthplace at the Newport News Shipbuilding, and there is rumblings afoot that she will again sail, we hope. We keep our fingers crossed. And it could happen. You never know.
Mike, I understand that the United States is almost just an empty hulk right now. They've gutted most of her public rooms. They've taken all the plumbing fixtures out of her cabins and so on. Won't it cost an immense amount of money to refurbish her for sailing?
$250 million.
Oh, my.
It's a lot cheaper to build a new one, but Mr. Hadley, God bless him, still is holding on to the dream of getting her back into service as a first-class liner.
Now, in your artwork for Titanic International, you have three ships: the Titanic, the Normandy, which was a French liner that caught on fire during World War II and was berthed in New York and the United States.
I was given leeway to design something for the organization, which I'm very happy to do.
Why did you like the United States?
Those are my three favorite ships: Titanic, Normandy, and United States. United States was our flagship. She was our one shot at great, glorious fame on the North Atlantic. We had her from 1952 until 1969, when the unions destroyed her. The maritime unions destroyed her and forced her into permanent layup.
Well, that of course, there's far more to it than that. You can't blame the unions entirely. And
Who can?
One thing about the logo is...
Ralph can. I don't know about it.
One thing about the logo is that it demonstrates the universality of the organization. Even though it is called Titanic International, it's going to deal with very many other passenger liners than other historical societies have been dealing with, and it's our hope to cover the period, the spectrum from about 1890 to 1950, the golden age of passenger travel on the North Atlantic. So Mike has demonstrated this in the logo with the three types of vessels.
Because you're leaving at 9:30, I'm going to jump ahead to a question or two here, and one of them has to do with the damage which is now in dispute. And I wanted to know if you accepted Dr. Ballard's assessment of why the Titanic went down, that the collision, he said, simply loosened or buckled seams in the hull, thereby flooding and sinking her, and that the collision did not generate that gash we've heard about for years and years, but the damage was really separation of the plates of the steel hull. Do you dispute that?
I do.
And you have for...
I believe that there may be some rethinking on the part of the people that developed that.
He was very strong about that.
I believe that it's been fairly conclusively demonstrated that when the iceberg struck the Titanic, it did make a gash. However, for many years it was thought that this was a continuous gash, and it has since been theorized and more or less conclusively demonstrated that it was an interrupted bumping along 300 feet of the hull, and it opened the seams of the plates. It didn't buckle the plates. It opened the seams, and the water poured into the watertight compartments, causing the bow to become heavy.
Okay, here's another. This is from a John McKeon, and it appeared a letter to the editor of the New York Times, July 31st, 1986. He said that his grandfather, John Curtin, as a young man, sailed for Cunard Lines under Captain Smith in the Majestic, that Captain Smith and crew were transferred to the Titanic for its maiden voyage, as we know. He says, my great-grandfather quit Cunard and instead settled in America. He knew the men of the Titanic's engine room. He knew ships. He knew Smith's reputation as a captain. He never believed that an iceberg sank the Titanic. He thought that regardless of time pressure, Smith was too cautious to risk his ship in a nighttime collision, and he believed, the great-grandfather, that vibrations from the mighty engines fatigued the hull and caused its failure. And the mistake was in the design, not in the captain. The ship was too big, and Edwardian arrogance, insolent pride, sank the Titanic, not the iceberg. No. Respond, please.
Well, we have in jurisprudence a term called res ipsa loquitur.
Meaning?
The thing speaks for itself. It's fairly conclusive from eyewitness accounts that the iceberg struck, or that the Titanic struck the iceberg, and 2 hours and 40 minutes thereafter did head toward the bottom of the North Atlantic. One of the most conclusive eyewitnesses is a fireman by the name of Fred Barrett. And Fred was standing on the steel floor of the boiler room, and he heard a rumbling coming from the bow, and he wondered what the dickens was going on. And
he found out very quickly.
He found out very quickly when the spur of the iceberg opened a gash in front of his very eyes.
He watched the plate punch in and the water shoot right out.
6 feet from in front of
How fast did Fred move after that, and where
he
did he
got soaked, and he turned and ran, and he dove through a door. He dove through the watertight door as it was coming down.
As it coming down?
And survived to give evidence at...
so he must have been one of the 13 picked up out there, right?
Oh, no. He got off. He ended
got
up
off on a boat, on a lifeboat?
He ended up being part of a crew.
So many of the crew did get off on lifeboats. Stokers, I understand, and it was...
Well, see, at that time, your stokers knew how to handle an oar, too. A good amount of them.
But some of the survivors said they didn't know how to handle oars at all. Right. The oars are clashing with each other.
These are not the stokers who were on duty. These are the stokers who had just come off duty, as a matter of fact, at midnight. And they were still in the wearing the clothing that they had when they were serving their previous shift.
Their whole new watch had gone down below.
Practically all of the people in the engine room, officers and crew alike, practically all of them died.
Nearly all of them.
Yes.
So the ones that survived were those that already come off shift.
Right.
That's correct. Or, in the case of Barrett, were sufficiently aware in a short enough time so that they could vacate their position. And he just dived for a ladder. After he got through the door, he climbed up the ladder and got to one of the upper decks. So it's fairly evident that the Titanic sank after striking a berg. Now, I think Dr. Ballard's theory about the buckled plates has a good foundation, because there, as it sits on the bottom of the Atlantic, the plates are buckled. But this comes, I think, from the impact rather than from the tearing of the ice. The ice cut a comparatively small hole in the side of the Titanic.
Now, why is it they couldn't find the gash?
Well, because it's buried underneath. It was only 15 feet above the keel. And that's the part that is buried as you look at it.
More than 15 feet.
More than 15 feet. I was going to say they measured the on the basis of how long it took the ship to sink, and after striking the berg. The hole in the Titanic was less than 12 feet square.
That's all.
That's it.
If you would if you totaled up the whole length of the gash and the intermittent gash and totaled it up, it would come to less.
But it was stretched out over 260 feet, intermittent punches and holes. Some of the holes were a foot across, some were like...
Is it true that had they decided to hit that doggone thing head on,
it wouldn't have sunk?
It wouldn't have sunk.
It would just stove in the first 2 compartments, maybe the first 3.
And everybody would have survived.
And it would have been
except some of the crew.
Some of the crew down there.
They figured it would have killed about 200 of the crew, because they were the ones that were just off duty. And they were up in their quarters, which were in the bottom.
Oh, I see. And it would have killed 200.
They would have crushed some of them, and some others would have drowned as those forward compartments flooded.
But you know, the immediate reaction is to try not to hit it, isn't it?
Of course, you want to avoid. It's instinct.
If they there was a wonderful short piece in one of the business publications a number of years ago, and it didn't mention the lookout by name, but of course it referred to dear Fred Fleet,
who survived.
Who survived, and the topic of the article was a job too well done. Fred Fleet, it seems, if he had not seen the iceberg, it would have hit dead on, and as we just said, would have stove in the bow, but still would have kept the ship
hadn't
afloat.
seen it, he would have lost his job, too.
Would have been a great embarrassment.
Nearly lost his life. All right, back with our guest in a moment. Titanic, our topic tonight. If you live anywhere in the northeast Philadelphia area, Elkins Park, Jenkintown, Abington, Willow Grove, or Glenside area, this message is for you. The Butcher's Discount Appliance at 860 Township Line in Elkins Park has value-packed deals on all Hot Point, Caloric, Sony, Zenith, Whirlpool, and Amana, dishwashers, air conditioners, refrigerators, ranges, TVs, and all household appliances. Now, how does Butcher's do it? Butcher's Discount Appliance is a member of the Key America buying group. Key America, made up of appliance dealers from all over the United States, has million-dollar buying power. Key America dealers pass the clout and the savings along to you. In addition, at Butcher's Discount Appliance, in business since 1972, you'll get top-quality service from beginning to end. Now, Butcher's wants your repeat business, and they'll work to get it. Brand names, value, pricing, and service. Visit Butch's Discount Appliance, the no-frills warehouse-looking building at 860 Township Line in Elkins Park, or call 215-782-1000. 215-782-1000, Butch's Discount Appliance.
WWDB.
For history that really comes alive and puts you smack in the middle of it, you can't beat Colonial Williamsburg. I'm talking with John Costello, Vice President of Star Motor Coach Tours. He's a real expert on the subject. John, how is it you know so much about Williamsburg?
Well, there's a good reason. The figures show that Star Tours takes more people from our area to Williamsburg than anyone else. And history really does come alive for you on this trip. You can visit a working blacksmith or wig maker as you stroll among costumed townspeople of the 18th century. Then leap forward in time for a day at Busch Gardens to enjoy the sights, sounds, and food of France, Italy, and England. We also stop at the Williamsburg Pottery Factory for some great shopping. 4 days are just $275 per person twin. Star's price includes those extras that people look for. And chances are we can pick you up right near your neighborhood.
As I leaf through Star's 1988 vacation planner, I see so many tours packed with interest, all at outstanding values. Now, I've arranged for you to get your copy free. Just call or stop in at Star Tours, 2034 Cotman Avenue, or see your travel agent.
You're live on 96.5.
Now, remember when you were little and Dad said, come on, we're going out to eat, and you knew you were going to your favorite family spot? Well, there is that favorite family restaurant right in Northeast Philly. Chevaliero's, it's called. Chevaliero's Restaurant, located off Frankfort Avenue. It's on Sheffield Avenue, about 3 blocks down. And it is perfect for a family night out. Chevaliero's features South Philly cuisine with a new menu. It includes veal chevaliero, chicken scampi over ravioli, and their chicken Nicola with shrimp is out of this world. Chevaliero's allows you and your family to enjoy a relaxing night out eating your favorite food and without spending a lot of money. Chevaliero's is now open Tuesday to Saturday from noon to 10 p.m. and Sunday from 4 to 9. Closed Mondays. You can call now. They're open till 10 o'clock tonight. Call 332-8880. Ask about their daily specials for WWDB listeners. Chevaliero's located at 4503 Sheffield Avenue, 3 blocks off of Frankfort Avenue. Call them right now at 332-8880. Jack Eaton has to leave us in about 5 minutes. Michael Ralph is here. Ed Thorne, out to Chalfont we go. And Stu, you're on the air. Hello.
Hi, Bernie. How you doing?
Fine, thank you.
I have a question that I find a situation which is kind of amazing. I have a very good friend of mine who lives in Toronto and is as much a Titanic expert as anybody I know. Has done many different multimedia presentations and is very knowledgeable about what really happened. He called me a week ago with an incredible story. He was visiting a friend of a friend, and apparently these people had a great-grandfather who apparently was a carpenter on the ship that picked up the bodies from the Titanic. It was not the Carpathia, and the name escapes me. I don't know if your guests know it.
The Minya.
Yes, okay. Apparently, when he was in the doing this, he picked up some wood that was floating right after the disaster, and brought it onto that particular ship, took it with him, and nobody really questioned him because he was a carpenter. Apparently, when he got home, he fashioned a chair out of it. And my friend was happening to be sitting on that wooden chair. Now, whether this is true or not, my friend had a lot of skepticism about it, but found out that there was some merit to some of this story, that the grandfather was indeed on that ship. My question to you is, if this story is true, how would you authenticate something like that?
There's no way to do that, is there?
Well, I guess the first thing to do would be to find out the name of the carpenter. It would be not too difficult then to find out whether he was aboard one of the several.
My friend has done that already.
All right, fine. Then it would probably the next best thing would be to find out the kind of wood that it was. Just not so much to diverge, but to augment what your friend has described. There is a general feeling that all up and down the east coast of Nova Scotia, there are fishermen's cabins that have fairly large pieces of wood from the Titanic lurking about in their cellars, but people have forgotten what the significance of them is. I remember when Walter Lord was up that way one time, he advertised fairly extensively for people to bring in pieces of wood to him and artifacts that might have been recovered from the ocean, just washed up on the beach at the time of the disaster, and he got no responses. So people by this time have either forgotten what they are or they've just lost their significance. It's entirely possible that that this chair made from Titanic wood does exist. It would be fairly difficult to actually authenticate it. The wood would have to be examined chemically, and it's not impossible.
Also, if we could get a picture of it, we do know extensively a lot of what the fancy woodwork on board the ship looked like. There are some pieces that are in the Maritime Museum up in Halifax that were recovered.
If we could do something like that, where would I send something like that to?
There's a museum at Halifax. It's the Maritime Museum of Nova Scotia.
Right.
And they would have somebody there that could probably be of as much assistance as anyone else, although I don't want to foist off on them a difficult or impossible job. It would certainly be a good place to start.
All right, Stu.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. 30 seconds. Anything you want to say, Jack, before you leave to catch your train?
Just that I have very much enjoyed being with you again, Bernie, and I hope I'll have a chance to see you again in the very...
Well, maybe on Saturday, right?
And if you're going to be around on Saturday, we'd certainly welcome you down at the Philadelphia Maritime Museum during the day. And I'd sure like to see you there so I could introduce you to some of your fellow enthusiasts.
It'll be my pleasure.
And to have you share your experiences with them, too.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. But Michael Ralph will stay with us, and we'll be discussing the Titanic at length for quite some time tonight. If you have any questions, we're talking about experts here who can answer them, at least we'll try. Now, if you own a small business, here's a free offer you shouldn't miss.
Listen to how AT&T helped Toddler University take a big step forward in the kids' shoe business.
We needed an affordable way to keep in touch with our customers and our retailers all over the country.
Major hurdle? No. With an AT&T 800 number, now customers call toll-free to find out where to buy the shoes, and retailers call to report on what's selling. Learn how to put telecommunications to work for your company with AT&T's Telecommunications Ideas to Grow On. These free booklets can help you to reach new customers in new markets and use telemarketing to boost sales and improve customer service.
Getting an 800 number was the best step we ever took. It's really helped our business to grow.
Bring out the big business in your small business. Free with AT&T's Telecommunications Ideas to Grow On.
To order your free booklets, call 1-800-962-9049. That's AT&T, the right choice.
86.5.
This is Dr. Art Mullen for the growers of Washington State apples. The 60s woman wanted to be thin, but the 80s woman, well, she wants to be trim. She's as concerned about firming and shaping her body as she is about her diet. She wants muscles, not bulky ones, but toned and well-defined ones. So weight training has become a popular option for her. And just because a woman works out with weights doesn't mean she's going to bulk up like a man. Women have significantly less testosterone than men. Testosterone is the hormone that gives men the ability to build their muscles. So when a woman trains with weights, they can firm their behinds, trim inches off their waist, and tighten their abdomens without greatly increasing the size of their muscles. Of course, a good diet is crucial to a rigorous weight training program. Make sure you eat fiber-rich foods like apples that also replace the water and potassium that your body loses during a workout. This is Dr. Art Mullen for the Washington State Apple Growers. Hope you're feeling good.
All right, we're talking about the Titanic tonight, and the reason we're doing that is because we're upon the 77th anniversary of the sinking. Saturday, April 15th is the 77th anniversary of the day the Titanic went down. It actually struck the iceberg before midnight on the 14th, and then went down at 2:20 early the next morning. I guess it actually, the date, of course, is the 15th.
Right.
But then it struck, I think, on a Sunday night, went down early Monday morning.
Right, early Monday morning, 2:20 in the morning.
When was it to arrive?
It was supposed to arrive in New York. There was a conjecture if the captain was going to race in, he would get in late Tuesday night. She was due to arrive, actually, according to the timetables, Wednesday morning, and Mr. Ismay, who was a managing director of the White Star Line, said under no circumstances was the ship to arrive earlier than Wednesday morning because they wanted a daylight when she came in.
So we couldn't blame Ismay then. You know, there's been speculation down through the years that Ismay forced the captain and the ship to go faster than it should go.
Poor Mr. Ismay has been so maligned.
He caught a lot of hell, didn't he?
He's been so maligned for one small error of judgment and stepping off the boat deck into a lifeboat that he has literally caught hell ever since. And then he died in 1937, a total recluse. He had to withdraw. A lot of people thought that he was forced out of the company in shame, when in fact he had decided that he was going to hand down the directorship of the White Star and the IMM, which was J. Pierpont Morgan's trust, the International Mercantile Maritime Society. He was going to hand over the directorship to Harold Sanderson at that time, and he did not, in fact, go off in disgrace. It had been planned beforehand that he would step down. So he just quietly withdrew up to Ireland and faded off.
How close to land was the Titanic when it sank?
Roughly 500 miles.
From Nova Scotia?
From Newfoundland.
From Newfoundland.
Right.
Why is the cemetery in Halifax, Nova Scotia?
That is where the recovery vessels were chartered out of. White Star Line chartered a cable-laying ship called the Mackay Bennett to recover bodies and anything that they possibly could from the wreck site. That was the closest harbor, the closest point of harbor where they could get out to this wreck.
And how many?
New York at that time was about 800 to 900 miles away.
How many did they recover?
There were 300 bodies that were recovered. Of that, I believe 170 or so, I don't know the exact, Jack's the expert on that, were brought into Halifax in a preserved state and then buried. Some had names that they knew of. Others were just unidentifiable and were buried as such.
Were most identified, or was it sort of a...
No, it was mostly a number.
Were they just floating on top of the water?
They were in their life jackets. Some were
in the life
clusters.
jackets.
Some were in clusters.
So the ones they found were normally in their life jackets.
Right, right.
But they just froze to death, I suppose.
They froze to death. Very few of them drowned. There was no sign of water in the lungs.
They died from exposure.
They died of exposure, right.
Now, we are aware that one of the survivors who jumped off the boat, who was a strong man, Colonel Gracie.
Yeah, Colonel Gracie.
Died 9 months later from the after effects of the exposure.
Right. He, I don't really know what caused his death other than exposure, and it weakened his health so badly that he finally expired of it, but he did write a very thrilling account of the
But here was a man who was no milquetoast. Here was a strong, rigorous bodybuilder and all the rest of that.
Right. He was a health and fitness enthusiast. In fact, he had to cancel an appointment. He was joking that he had to cancel his squash racket court appointment for the following morning.
The Gracie Mansion, is that after his family in New York?
Yes, they are related. Yes, they were related.
Okay. How many survivors are left altogether?
I would say roughly maybe 24 scattered around the world. Some are still in England, some in France.
A few years ago they said 30. Now you're saying it's
24. Yeah. Personal favorite and friend of mine was Edwina Mackenzie.
And she's passed on.
She lived to be 100 years old. She was in California, Hermosa Beach. A wonderful lady who rode a bicycle right up to the time of her death. And very independent. Her mind was crystal clear, could carry on a happy conversation with you, and knew your name.
How old was she when she was...
She was 100.
No, I mean, when she was on the Titanic.
27.
27. Eva Hart was 7 years old.
Eva was 7, and Eva is still going very strong over in England. She had a hip operation. We've been in contact with her, and she's a delightful person.
Now, she lost her father. The father was going to Canada to begin a business, right?
Yes, to Winnipeg.
And Mama said, no, don't go. She had this premonition.
Her mother was a very formidable lady, very headstrong for the period of time, and she had a premonition that something was going to go wrong. They were going over originally on a ship called the Philadelphia, and
was it a strike?
There was a coal strike.
Yeah.
And what they needed to do was to gather the coal from as many vessels as possible so Titanic could sail. And at the time, they took the coal from the Philadelphia, laid her up, and transferred all of her passengers to Titanic. They were going over first class on the Philadelphia and ended up second class on Titanic. And at that time, when Eva's mother found out what ship they were going on, she said, "Now I know why I've been apprehensive, because we're going on that ship Titanic, and they're calling it unsinkable, and that's flying in the face of God. And now I know, and I will stay up every night."
And she did, didn't she? She slept during the day, was up at night.
Stayed up every night, and she was up the night they hit the iceberg, and she was just a remarkable lady. She knew. And he was very...
He was reluctant to do it.
Very ill-advised and grumbled, and he finally said, "All right, I'll go up, and just to shut you up, and I'll go up and I'll check it out." And he says, "Now you see there's nothing wrong, and now you'll leave me be, and I'll go to sleep." So the second time that it happened, he was about fed up with her, and he went up on deck the second time.
That's the following night.
Sunday. And he came down, and his face was very white, and he says, "I think you should get up and put on your warm clothing and get Eva. We have to go up on deck. The captain wants us on deck."
Yeah. Didn't Eva remember as the lifeboat went down, she looked up and her father was looking over
And her father was looking over the railing, smoking a cigarette, and he nonchalantly waved, and that was the last she ever saw of him.
Was his body recovered? Or
No, it was never recovered.
All right. Our contact number 365-4100. With us now is Michael Ralph, who is a historian, writer, marine artist with a special interest in the Titanic. And our contact number 365-4100. Back in a moment. Are you looking for an alternative to many advertised weight loss programs that just don't take your health into account? Well, all natural Vital 18 does. It provides fuel for your body and brain. Dieters often decrease their nutritional intake while reducing calories. Liquid Vital 18 contains a powerful C product. It's called spirulina. 22 amino acids, minerals, and vitamins that energize your body and stimulate your metabolism naturally. And it's available in 2 delicious flavors: butternut and chocolate, Vital 18 with a fiber, fruit, vegetable-filled diet to promote weight loss, or with a full balanced diet for stamina and energy. Now, 1 tablespoon of Vital 18 with 7 ounces of milk taken 3 times daily replaces 2 meals. Discover an incredibly energizing and exciting all-natural product, Vital 18. Call 1-800-888-2176. 1-800-888-2176. Vital 18 is available at Nature's Way, 2400 Kirkwood Highway in Wilmington, Delaware. Consult your doctor if you have sugar or diabetic problems.
WWDB.
Take charge of your health and come to Methodist Hospital's annual health fair on Saturday, April 29 from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Free screenings will take place, such as cholesterol, diabetes, glaucoma, and more. Come and enjoy Philadelphia's finest string bands, a teddy bear clinic for the kids, and a special pitching workshop led by Tug McGraw. For more information, call Methodist Hospital at 952-9001. Take charge of your health and have fun at the same time.
96.5.
All right, business owners, do you know what the Eastland Group is? Well, you should, because they could be the key to promoting your business like it's never been promoted before. I'm sure that you've seen other businesses advertising themselves with T-shirts or jackets or caps or pens or coffee mugs or bumper stickers, and there's a good chance that those products came from the Eastland Group. Now, the Eastland Group is a Philadelphia-based supplier of custom imprinted advertising products. They stock thousands of items. They print at their own plant, and they're able to meet most any deadline with quality and pricing that will surprise you. If you need as few as 12 or as many as 1,000 T-shirts or mugs imprinted in one day, Eastland can do it. Order by phone and use any major credit card. The secretaries call for a free catalog for your boss right now at 969-4000. 969-4000. Out of state, call 1-800-231-3440. Call right now and get the edge on your competition. The Eastland Group, 969-4000. Back to our calls. My guest now, Michael Ralph. And out to Collegeville. Hello, Drew.
Hi. I just wanted to comment on something that was said earlier. The story of this magnificent ship is truly an undying topic. I'm a 6th and 7th grade teacher in the Perkiomen Valley School District here in Collegeville, and I use Walter Lord's book, A Night to Remember, as our last book of the year. And my entire classroom is filled with Titanic related pictures and posters and pamphlets, you name it.
Is it?
And this is the second year we've done it, and last year's group was so enthused, they wanted to come back and do it again this year, and I was amazed at how much interest there was in it.
Why do you imagine there is, Drew?
I don't
You're talking about young people who are, what, 12, 13 years old?
12, 13 years of age. And I think a lot of it is really just the way Walter Lord's book is written. I mean, it is an excellent book.
Mm-hmm.
And it just gets them into it, and the more I do with it, the more they get enthused with it. Matter of fact, the last thing we do is a trip to the Philadelphia Maritime Museum and get a trip on board the SS Galileo, which is on dock the same day when we get there, which is a nice experience for them also.
Yeah.
But they really, like I said, they just really get into it. I just started it today with my classroom this year, and I was already amazed at how many questions they were asking. As a matter of fact, it's one of my students this year who told me about your talk show tonight. They happened to let me know this in the evening. But I did have a quick question.
Sure.
Also, is there any way you can get guest speakers to come in, for example, to talk to the students to keep them enthused and interested for years to come?
That's a good question.
Yeah, in the way of guest speakers, what did you mean?
Well, I mean, I realize there's not too many survivors in the area that could do anything but, like, authors.
Well, I would imagine that Charlie Haas or Jack Eaton would be happy to, if they can arrange it, would come and speak before students. I myself have done some talks, mostly in front of travel agents, believe it or not, who are interested in the Titanic. Don't ask me why, but they are. I've given several lectures that way. But I'm sure if this Saturday...
Well, I plan to be at that Titanic International.
Okay,
Then he can make some nice contacts there, couldn't he?
Contacts there.
Yeah. Right. There will be a lot of people there, I'm sure, who could come out. And, I'm always happy to, and I'm sure other people would be happy to speak before groups and just to keep the interest going, because it's a fascinating subject, and we need the support. We want more people to become involved.
Okay, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Drew. This meeting this coming Saturday is to form a new group called Titanic International. Is it open to anybody?
Sure, it's open to anybody who has an interest in either the Titanic or any of the old ocean liners or the new ocean liners, the cruise ships. My personal interest is on the modern cruise ships. I am assistant editor of a magazine, Cruise Digest Reports, and I do an awful lot of writing and reviewing the modern cruise ships. I love all ocean liners. Of course, my interest today has directly related to the Titanic and other ships, other passenger liners, and I've been interested in them for almost 35 years now, and collecting memorabilia. And it's evolved into making it pay off now. You can get to do some of these trips, write articles about them, and it's a fascinating subject.
I have to tell you, when my interest began at the Titanic years ago, when I was, I guess it was about 10 or 11 years old, I went into the library, and I found an essay by Elbert Hubbard. And it couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 pages if it was that much. As tragically as it turned out, Elbert Hubbard lost his life later in the Lusitania. The sinking of the Lusitania in 1916, I guess.
15, yeah, May.
One of the incidents that propelled us, the United States, into World War I. And I read this thing, but what really struck me was, first, I'd only heard sketchily about it before, and then reading about the heroic acts and about the Astors and about the people who owned Macy's, the Strausses, and how the woman, Mrs. Strauss, decided she wanted. I've been with my husband 50 years. I'm going, I'll stay with him until the end, and so on. But there wasn't much more than that. Now, I noticed that over the years there have been some reprints of Archibald Gracie's book and Beasley's book, but they were not available at the time, and so. And Walter Lord came along many years later.
Mr. Lord, who is really a delightful man. He's a terrific. He's a good friend. I can't say enough good about him. He got a whole new generation of people interested in the Titanic, and his research has been exhaustive. Of course, everybody does not agree with some of his findings, but...
what are some of the findings that they disagree with?
Well, there's still a great amount of controversy about the Californian and Captain Lord's guilt or innocence and standing by. Was he, in fact, the ship who stood by 5 miles away as Titanic
What do you
sank?
think?
I don't think he was. I really don't. I think because of where the positions that have been plotted, Captain Lord was a good 15 to 19 miles north and west of the position the Titanic sank, and he was in the ice field that the Titanic also hit. That ice field, you've got to understand, stretched 70-some miles and was 2 to 3 miles across. So nothing really sailing that night was going to get through that ice field unscathed. Titanic just blundered into it, and it was a miracle, really, that she got as far as she did.
Before she hit something.
Before she hit something, because it was ice all over the place. California, when she sped up from the southeast, was dodging icebergs a good hour before she got to the position of Titanic's last radio position, which in fact was not the correct position. They had miscalculated a little bit, and when Carpathia got there was absolutely nothing. Then they saw in the distance a light from a lifeboat, which someone had lit up some newspapers and some paper, and then a straw hat. And then an elderly lady had an electric cane, which she waved in the air, and then they had to go another 3-4 miles to get to the position of the lifeboats. So I don't think...
You don't think it was Captain Stanley Lord?
No,
he took a rap for that, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He lost his job with the Leland Line, which, strangely enough, was also owned by the IMM, Mr. Morgan's Combine, which owned White Star at the time, too, Titanic. So... he did get a bum rap out of it. However, he did go to work as captain with the Uranium Steamship Company, and he did retire then in the 20s, but he always tried to clear his name, and was, in fact, still trying to up until the time of his death. And it has never really... Nothing has come of it. And
Do we know what ship that was?
No. There's been a lot of different reports and a lot of different names, and there's an awful lot of conjecture, but, it will go round and round and round as long as there are people to talk about it, to fight on this side or the other, for Captain Lord or against him. The ones who are for him are the Lordites. The ones who are against him are... everybody else.
Now there are still people, including some naval experts, maritime experts, who believe it was the California, it was Lord, and others who do not. I know that you don't, and I think that also Jack Eaton does not believe it was.
No, Charlie Haas, Jack Eaton, and myself, in doing a lot of the research for the books, there's just too much evidence to show that it's not the Californian that was that ship that was so close, because it was moving. The eyewitnesses on board Titanic said the ship that they observed was moving towards them and then away from them. Californian was stopped dead in the water.
And
she
why
was
were they
drifting? She was drifting with the current, which was less than 2 knots.
Were they waiting for daybreak so they could see the ice field?
Yeah, Captain Lord had never sailed through ice before, and he said, there is no way I'm going to take my ship through that. We'll wait until dawn.
Well, then
and
why did Captain Smith take his ship through that?
Captain Smith was a little bit of, he was a hardy and bluff sailor. He figured that everything was okay with the world. And
Wait. Now, here's that letter to the editor of the New York Times from this guy who worked with Captain Smith in the Majestic when Mr. Kennard has said that he was a cautious man. Was he or wasn't he cautious?
He was cautious to a degree. These ships had to maintain a certain schedule. Now, they figured they had all the faith in the world in their lookouts and the maneuverability of these vessels. See, what you had here...
Why didn't Frederick Fleet have a set of binoculars, a pair of binoculars?
There were a set of binoculars originally when Titanic sailed from Belfast. Now, at the last minute, there was a big shakeup with a lot of the senior officers, and the fellow who owned the binoculars, his name was Davy Blair. He was the third officer. He was transferred. He was bumped off the ship. And it was just fate. It was a fickle finger of fate award for that ship from the day one. If it could go wrong, it was going to go wrong.
Murphy's Law.
Yeah, right. But the ship was new. It was untried. She was the biggest thing in the world. Nothing had ever been built that big before. They didn't know what her capabilities and her sea-keeping capabilities were. Could she maneuver? Could she swing? Her sea trials were not really what ships would be given today. The United States, when she was built in 1952, had 6 weeks of sea trials. The most exhaustive trials a ship had ever been put through. Titanic had less than 6 hours. She had to keep a schedule. So everything was rush, rush, rush. And it was a very unfortunate, but...
and it cost.
And that was it. It cost many lives.
All right. 365 for 100. Attention homeowners, if you have those old wood or metal windows, then you need the Budget Window Company. If you have single pane windows with cold, drafty rooms, call the Budget Window Company now. And believe me, don't wait, because now is the time to get your best price. Spring is here, and it's time to get your home back in shape. If you want the best price on windows, you buy them from the Budget Window Company. These are the last few weeks for the Budget Window Company's factory rebates, free low E-glass specials, and spring discounts. So don't wait. Call Budget Window Company now before it's too late. This is your last chance. They're a member of the Better Business Bureau and backed by the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval. So call now. The specials are almost over. In Philadelphia, call 338-0898. That's 338-0898. In New Jersey, call 609-424-6646. 609-424-6646, the Budget Window Company, the company of quality and service that we've told you about for years.
WWDB.
Mom, all you've got is 2 potatoes in your basket. What happened to the world's fastest shopper?
I can't find anything for my hay fever.
There are so many products here. Look, this stops sneezing.
That makes me sleepy.
And this?
Doesn't stop my sneezing.
There must be something that stops sneezing without making you sleepy.
I'm so confused.
End the confusion. As a nurse, I know that now your doctor can give you fast relief from all your hay fever symptoms without the drowsiness you may have had before. See your doctor.
Merrill Dow Pharmaceuticals.
96.5.
Now, if you're a senior citizen who likes to tour and travel, there's a tour company designed with your needs in mind. Senior Tours has been satisfying over 30,000 clients since 1976 with the experience, comfort, service, fun, and professionalism that will leave you with peace of mind. Senior Tours offers ultra-deluxe European design motor coaches, modern, comfortable with twin TVs and a VCR, step-down, mid-coach, lavatory, and extras. Also, Senior Tours offers you your money back if you're not completely satisfied. Right now, if you have a yen to travel cross-country to California, then Senior Tours offers you 28 days of the tour of a lifetime. Travel cross-country on deluxe motor coach, stopping in scenic towns and cities. Stop for shows and casinos in Reno and Lake Tahoe. From the Spruce Goose of Long Beach to San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf, travel the relaxed, leisurely pace with fully escorted Senior Tours. Call 1-800-227-1100 for a brochure and details. 1-800-227-1100 to Northeast Philly. And hello, Kate. Kate, you're on the air.
Hi, Bernie. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Super. It's a wonderful show you have tonight.
Thank you.
I'm not a Titanic buff. I don't have a lot of background to ask technical questions, but I was curious about any planned future efforts to do further excavation on the Titanic, what sort of limitations these people would run into in addition to finances, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And if your guest had any interesting stories as far as interesting things that have been brought up, I'd be interested to hear about those as well.
Well, as far as any future planned excavation of the ship, there's always rumor that there's somebody who's going to go out there and try to grapple and hook and pull up different pieces. There is legislation in America forbidding the excavation or the retrieval of any of the artifacts on board. Now, the French government had gone out and done an expedition, and there was a special on TV with Telly Savalas about a year ago with some of the artifacts that have been brought up. These are still in France. They're still being restored, and there is talk that they will tour. Now, whether they will come to America is highly doubtful because of our legislation, forbidding anything coming up from that wreck. It's up in the air right now. There's all kinds of rumor and conjecture, and I really don't want to comment unless I know for certain and have my facts correct.
Right, Kate, what kind of story were you looking for?
Well, I guess to date there have probably been a large number of things brought up. Have you found any interesting backgrounds on any of the pieces that have been brought up, or are there I guess, what articles of interest, anything unusual or anything from a famous person? I'm just curious about what sort of things have been brought up.
Okay, there was some of the silver service from the first-class a la carte restaurant was retrieved, a large silver platter measuring about 18 inches by 24 inches. That was recovered. There was a statuette or statuary work from the first-class smoking room. That was recovered. These things have been documented in photographs of the public rooms of the ship before she sailed on her maiden voyage. There was a valise, a leather valise that was recovered from one of the first-class passengers who had a cabin on B deck. The fellow had put their money and some of the jewels and precious things that they wanted to save and went out on deck walking around and never got back to the cabin and to pick up his bag. Now when the ship busted in half and split, everything in the cabin spilled out, and that bag was retrieved and brought to the surface by the French, and the articles were in there was his daughter's necklace. His daughter's name was Amy. I cannot think of the fellow's name. It started with a B.
Yeah, and down there also they found, I don't know where they retrieved these things, so they found a champagne bottle. There was a ceramic doll's head, an electric heater, an adjunct to the ship's heating system was a feature found only in first-class cabins. There was a silver serving bowl next to a clock, steam pipe. Wooden stair steps were spurred by the wood borers that went and ate the middle frame of a deck bench, a section of a heating duct. There was a spittoon from one of the smoking rooms.
They got some of the copper pots.
Right, a corrosion-resistant copper pot and some other stuff, yeah.
They had wanted to bring up a lot of things. They did.
We got to stop now. It's news time. Okay?
Okay, many thanks.
You're entirely welcome.
Thank you.
Bernie Herman with my guest, Michael Ralph, WWDB in Philadelphia.
From ABC News, I'm Bob Walker. The Senate has okayed the Democratic version of a minimum wage bill. It would raise the minimum wage to $4.55 an hour by 1991. President Bush has said he will go for $4.25 an hour tops. And so the battle lines are still drawn. Vic Ratner has the latest from Capitol Hill.
30 cents may not seem like much, but a difference of 30 cents an hour is what's involved in the minimum wage battle. The Senate approved $4.55 an hour, even though Republican leader Dole urged the Democrats not to provoke a presidential veto.
The bottom line is, what will he sign? And in this case, I have it on pretty good authority that it's not going to be any higher than $4.25.
Chief sponsor Edward Kennedy is still hopeful of a change in the wind.
The battle for the mind of the president now begins.
Minor differences between Senate and House bills still have to be resolved, while each side pressures the other. Vic Ratner, ABC News at the Capitol.
And I'll have more news after this.
It's big, really big. It's Levi's Week at Sears. The brand is hot, the style's cool. Stonewash, pre-wash, whitewash, exciting Levi's shirts, dockers, jackets, and more. All at Sears everyday low prices. So you don't have to wait for a sale to look tall in the saddle. Rustle up one of America's favorite brands at America's favorite store during Levi's Week at Sears.
Your money's worth and a whole lot more.
Hi there. You know, just because I look great on a camcorder doesn't mean I don't know a few things about buying one. Case in point, Sears' own LXI camcorder. It has some very attractive features, like a zoom mic that records twice the distance. That means America's best-selling camcorder outfit just got better, and it's completely accessorized, including 2 extra lenses. And it's just $999.96. That's smart money. Beautiful,
Your money's worth and a whole lot more.
Mexican police will resume digging in the morning for more bodies at a rural shack across the Texas border from Brownsville. The suspects in the grisly cult murders have told them 2 more bodies are buried there, in addition to the dozen bodies already recovered. One of those found was Mark Kilroy, age 21, a University of Texas student. When asked what punishment the cult leader should get, the victim's father, James Kilroy, stopped short of asking for the death penalty.
This case is serious enough where, the federal people in Mexico and the people here are going to make sure that they control these people and they don't get out and harm our society anymore.
Mexican police said members of a drug ring told them Kilroy and other victims were selected as human sacrifices, then mutilated. The alleged ringleader of the group, a Cuban, and 3 other men are still being sought by Mexican federal authorities. Peter Uberoff thought he had a deal to buy Eastern Airlines of somewhere around $460 million. But the deal collapsed, and the former baseball commissioner made the announcement.
This transaction elapsed last night, and it's done. Our agreement with Texas Air is finished, and it's terminated, and it's over.
The bankruptcy judge in charge of Eastern immediately moved to attract new buyers, but Eastern's unions beat him to it, already asking TWA boss Carl Icahn to jump in.
We've been invited by the unions a number of times in the last few weeks. In fact, I got a call from him even this morning to come in and make a bid.
Icahn did not say he would make an offer. As for the airline, Eastern President Phil Bakes said he would concentrate on getting the planes flying, saying Eastern would return as a much smaller air carrier than before. President Bush today proposed an ethics and government bill that would set standards of conduct for all three branches of government. It would also weaken the political grip of special interest money. And to help stem the brain drain, the president recommended a 25% pay increase for federal judges and also endorsed increases for Congress and top civil servants. The co-developer of the University of Utah coal fusion process faced a tough audience today of his peers, but B. Stanley Pond said he emerged from a meeting with the American Chemical Society convinced his findings are really a breakthrough in nuclear science. This is ABC News. Texaco officials meet with industry officials tomorrow and are expected to brag about the new company that a year ago was in bankruptcy court. And many analysts on Wall Street say Texaco has a right to brag. Michael Young of Smith Barney said the story is an attractive one to see. In the past year, Texaco has reduced its debt sharply, raised $7 billion in cash from asset sales, and set a new course that its president, James Kenner, said he hopes will make Texaco one of the industry's most admired companies. For the ABC Information Network, I'm Bob Walker.
96.5 WWDB. We hear you.
Welcome to hour number 3, the Bernie Herman program. And tonight we've been taking a look again at the legend of the Titanic. Here this week, the 77th anniversary of its sinking. Jack Eaton was with us for the first hour and a half, had to catch a train back to New York, and Jack is a historian and co-author of the book Titanic, Triumph and Tragedy. But Michael Ralph has been able to stay with us. He is also an historian, writer, and marine artist with a special interest in the Titanic, helped to research Mr. Eaton's book along with Charles Haas. And it happened, as people know now, on a cold April night in 1912, the magnificent new liner Titanic, proclaimed unsinkable by many, struck an iceberg in the mid-Atlantic and went down with an appalling loss of life. It was one of the great news stories of all time, and yet it was little more than a distant haunting memory when Walter Lord's gripping bestseller, A Night to Remember, introduced the drama to a whole new generation of readers in 1955. I have before me one of the several issues having to do with Dr. Ballard's expedition that many of you may have seen in specials on PBS. And in this particular compilation of photographs and text in National Geographic, this is the October 1987 issue, we have one of the most poignant of all images taken by the Angus. And it is that of a pair of boots. It is resting on the seafloor at such an angle that it is probable that the owner sank to the bottom while still wearing the boots. And there they are. How did this photograph impress you, Michael Ralph?
It's very, it's poignant. You're looking basically at the last stop for a gentleman, whether he was a passenger or a member of the crew. Mm-hmm. His body came to the bottom with the Titanic, and the boots are laying at such an angle as that this person would have come down on his back and would have been laying. When looking at the picture, you know that that's all that is remaining of some individual.
I don't get to be too macabre, but I've always wondered in my mind what happened to those people who sank with the ship, who went down. And according to the text, deep-sea scavengers disposed of the human remains, but the boots proved inedible. And I wondered why, and they say the hostile environment of the tannic acid used to preserve leather on land kept them intact underwater.
Mm-hmm. Same with the valise.
The question they ask, yes, who was the owner of the boots? A passenger, a crew member? Was he young or old, a wealthy man, or a poor immigrant? We can speculate, but... What was the TV film with Lawrence Beasley as a major character?
That was it. That's
was that the one?
Titanic, right?
Yeah.
Where he supposedly had the liaison with the young woman passenger, and
right.
You know, it was nothing. It was far-fetched. Mm-hmm. It was a nice spectacle. There were some nice touches to it, but for the most part, a lot of the fact was very thinly stretched over a storyline.
To Titanic aficionados, which is the best of the bunch?
A Night to Remember, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
A Night to Remember. That's the top drawer one. That's it.
All right. Of course, there were many more survivors living at the time, and quite a few were invited to the world premiere.
Yes, and they enjoyed it for the most part.
Yeah. You know, with all the years that had gone by, do you happen to know how Walter Lord got in touch with so many people?
No, I don't. Every time I've spoken with Walter, the conversation goes 500 miles an hour, and there's so many things flying by. It's fast and furious. I don't know how he did his research.
Well, I know that Reader's Digest bankrolled the whole project, and so he had an opportunity to do a lot of traveling.
Oh, yeah, he could travel.
I would imagine what happened was he'd meet one person, and the one person, well, I know where that other, you know, and
probably word of mouth.
Word of mouth contact.
And he did a lot of advertising, ads in newspapers, and coming to town such and such a date, any survivors. He checked passenger lists and where people were, and he looked in phone books, and it's just a lot of heavy research.
There were quite a few people from Philadelphia in the Titanic.
Oh, yes. Some well-known folks on board, too. The Wideners.
Thayers.
The Thayers, the Cardezas. Oh, my, Bucknells. A good cross-section of the society.
There was
immigrants all the way up to your millionaires.
Yeah, there was, and I've got the story, but I don't have it in front of me. The news came, and no one knew quite sure who had survived, who hadn't. But Caruso was in town. They were giving an opera.
Yes, he was at the Metropolitan.
And so they stopped it to announce the sinking of the Titanic.
Well, that was on a Monday night. That was on the 15th.
On the 15th.
Right.
A lot of Philadelphians were in that audience.
Yes, and they left.
And they left, got up and left and walked out.
And they went right to the White... There had been reports that something was wrong with the ship, but at that time, the rumor was that she was being taken to Halifax. She was under tow by another smaller liner called Virginian. Everybody thought, well, everything is all right.
Well, you recall in seeing one of the early front pages of, I guess, a New York newspaper, Titanic hits iceberg, but all safe on board, something to that.
Right. I think all safe. Titanic hits iceberg, all safe, on way to Halifax. Some such nonsense.
Yeah, and then of course when the story came in, there were several people who went down to the White Star offices.
Yeah, on Walnut Street.
And allegedly when the news came through, that some of the women screamed and fainted.
Oh yeah, they fainted dead away. It was very dramatic. About the only parallel we can draw with that today, I think, is when Challenger exploded. The spacecraft, when that exploded. That hit with an impact of like Titanic. It was something totally unexpected.
Yeah.
And it happened, and you're just caught, and what can you do? You're in shock.
Right. Now, I was given to understand, and I didn't get a chance to ask Jack the question, that Jack was planning and writing a book about many of those who survived and what happened to them, not the ones who have survived to this day, but what happened after they arrived home. Were they able to recover from the trauma, not only the tragedy, but of losing loved ones?
Some of the wives.
Mostly it was wives losing husbands, isn't that correct?
Right.
Walter Lord said many soon married again.
Yes, they did. some women whose husbands were saved along with them divorced.
Divorced them. And why? Because they felt their husbands were cowards?
There was a stigma there that the husband survived, and why did he survived and Mr. Astor didn't, or Mr. Guggenheim didn't, or Mr. Strauss? Why was this man?
So it's true that there were some divorces because the husbands did survive.
They survived, right. They had the nerve to survive.
Were all of the women in first class rescued along with their children?
Not all. There was, I believe, 2 women. I'm thinking off the top of my head. I believe Mrs. Ryerson died with her husband and daughter. They were from Toronto. There was a Mrs. Strauss. She chose to go down with her husband. There were a few others, but for the most part, I would say the women and children of first class were saved. Second class, marginally less. Third class, it was disastrous. It was really tragic.
I had a list here somewhere of the of those.
That was in
people.
A Night to Remember, I believe. Walter put that down quite well.
Well, I had a later list.
There was a chart
somewhere of the number of people who had been. Here it is, right here. They said of first class passengers, 118 were lost.
Mostly men.
118 men lost. And 57 men were saved, 140 women. 4 women were lost among the first-class passengers. The children were all saved.
Well, that was incorrect. There was one, Mrs. Ryerson's daughter.
How old was
went
she?
Down. She was 3. The whole family stayed together.
So there is, that's incorrect. So the 3-year-old girl...
She drowned. She was the only passenger.
Among the second-class passengers, 154 men were saved, 14 were lost. I beg your pardon, 154 men were lost and 14 were saved.
Right.
13 women were lost, 80 women were saved, second class now. The children, 24 were saved, none were lost.
In second class, all the children did get off. Right.
But third class.
Including Eva Hart.
Third class. That was the tough one.
That was tragic.
387 men lost, 75 saved. 89 women lost, 76 saved. 52 children were drowned, 27 saved.
One steward was basically responsible for getting those women and children up to those boats. He made 2 trips back there to rescue them. And
of the crew, 670 men were lost, 192 saved.
Right.
And, there were some women crew. They were called stewardesses. 20 were saved, 3 were lost.
Right.
But there were a number of young men. Looked like bell caps. I guess they used to apprentice onto the ship. 14, 15 years old.
These were the bellboys.
Bellboys.
Right.
Did any of them survive?
No, they all died.
Interestingly enough, in Walter Lord's index of people saved and people lost, the crew are not mentioned
No,
at
they're not
all.
listed. There's a marvelous little bit of research done. There's a crew roster, a book that was done.
Roster of Valor?
Yeah, the Roster of Valor. I can't think of the fellow's name. I'm so embarrassed. My goodness, he was... I knew him, too, but he did document all of the crew, their names, where they were from, did they live or not, and it's quite amazing.
By the way, did any husbands survive but not wives? We have wives surviving and not husbands. We have some husbands going down with wives in first class.
No, that wasn't the case. There was one gentleman who did leave the ship, and his wife left the ship. They left separately, and when they got to shore, when they got to Carpathia, he was standing on the deck looking over the side and saying, "Oh, I thought you'd get off." And that was one of the divorces. And when they got back, she quickly jettisoned him. They were having trouble before, I think.
Oh, all right. Couldn't have been a great deal of love there to be.
No, not really.
All right, we're talking Titanic tonight, the 77th anniversary of its sinking. And with us, Michael Ralph, historian, writer, marine artist with special interest in the Titanic at Thorne, Buff, and this is Bernie Herman, and our contact number 365-4100.